And welcome back, guys, to the Vigor Life podcast. And I got to tell you, today, every time I'm like, I love it. This is a special one, but this is certainly special because it's one of the legends in the industry and somebody I've looked up to for a long time, followed for a long time. I remember, now it must be like 16 years ago, probably my first Perform Better Summit, maybe even further than that. Watching you speak, getting on strengthcoach.com. It's been a long time learning and continue to learn from you. So it's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show, Mr. Michael Boyle.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I like doing it. I've enjoyed watching your career, to be honest. I am fascinated. I love it. I watch your place. I sent you a jealous Instagram message the other day. People on your Thanksgiving Day workout, and we only had 30. So
I love it. Thank you, man.
I love what you're doing.
Appreciate that. And I always think about, for me, these, like I said before too, this is a conversation, and I want folks to just extract as much value from it. And, the kind of like the two buckets, like I said before, that I really want to dive down into is, number one is, where you are right now, all this stuff, when you look back, sharing the biggest insights on training. And I know we're going to riff on this because you asked me even 5 years ago about my thoughts on training. They're pretty different than they are today. Maybe because I turned, I'm 41 now, and I think that's definitely some of it. But, you've been a person that's been so good, and honestly, like somebody I modeled in this sense. You're willing to learn. You're willing to, go like, you know what? I don't like this anymore, or I think there's something better, and just evolved so much. And so, today, if you were talking to even just, I would say fitness enthusiasts, but coaches, when it comes to training, what are some thoughts as far as like, look, this is the 80-20, this is 20% of the stuff you got to do to get 80% of results. Here's the things I don't like anymore. Almost like a foundational, big rocks, when it comes to training.
I think a lot of people probably will say, oh, I know what he's going to say, because I've got the typical old man response. Like you said, you just turned 41. I just turned 63. So I've been doing it literally as long as you've been alive. This is my 41st year. And I think the biggest thing that if someone said to me, what are you saying? One, I would say, learn about the Dunning-Kruger effect and understand it and realize it's going to affect your life. When you're in your 20s, you're going to be a dick know-it-all, and you're going to really put some people off, because you'll be so convinced that you're invincible and that everybody else is also invincible. And then you'll hurt some people, you'll hurt yourself. I wrote you probably read it, but years ago, I wrote Evolution of a Strength Coach. And I said, everybody starts out sort of like meathead. I want to look good. I want to meet girls. You know what I mean? That's kind of the beginning stage for everybody. And then I jokingly said, then you become like the power lifter, because you realize that people make fun of the guys, the guy with no legs that's in there, just doing chest and arms, is getting laughed at by the real lifters. And then you get hurt. And then you start to go, oh, wait a second, I think there's a little more to this. And then you start finding other smart people. That's when you find the Stuart McGills, you find these people in your life, and you start to think, oh, wait a second, there was probably a better way to do this than the idiotic go heavier, go home stuff that I was doing in my 20s. And I was, arguing with people on social media about and doing all that stuff. So I guess the biggest part of my advice would be, if that's you, if you're listening and you're thinking, oh my God, why am I even bothering listening to Mike Boyle? He's going to talk about all this stuff about, not hurting people and being safe and doing unilateral training. Then realize that I am talking directly to you, because you'll be the one who 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road messages me and says, wow, I wish I'd listened sooner. Because I get those messages all the time from people who say things like, I jokingly have I used to think Mike Boyle was a pussy club. There's a whole bunch of guys. Every year, some more guys join that club and realize that, wow, I used to think Mike Boyle was such a pussy. He's always talking about not hurting people and being safe. And then suddenly they got a little older and they think, wow, I know what he's talking about now. So I think that would be the biggest part to me, is just the idea that when you think that there's a lift that you have to do, or if you're lifting heavy, or I used to keep a 500 count bottle of Advil in my drawer of my desk when I was at BU back in the old days, and I'd be banging down 12 or 16 of them a day sometimes for whatever was aching. And I still remember one of my orthopedic surgeon friends, the one who told me that it was the safest drug. He said, this is the safest thing they've ever invented. It's like a godsend. Grabbed me one day at a football game and he was like, you still taking all that Advil? And I was like, oh, eat it like candy, wash it down with Diet Coke every day. And he was like, stop. He was like, it's really bad for your liver or your kidneys. I forget what it was, but they suddenly realized that all this sort of the miracle non-steroidal anti-inflammatory was not a miracle anymore. But I guess the difference for everybody is to realize I lived that same life. I lived the your back's supposed to hurt after squatting and deadlifting, and your shoulders are supposed to be sore after you bench, and hopefully you recover enough in 7 days to be able to do it again 7 days later. And that's so not what it's about on every level. Because now I look at it and I say to people, when you're training, we train lots of kids, and they're somebody's kids, which means somebody's sad if they're hurt, right? I mean, besides them. And
yeah.
And then we train lots of adults, and like somebody can't go to work if they're hurt, or somebody has to get surgery, or you know what I mean? There's all of these things. And I mean, now we've lived through CrossFit. I think hopefully we're sort of at the end of that foolishness, but we went through that whole thing where people said stuff like, well, getting injured is part of it. It's part of working out. You've got to accept the fact that you might get hurt. So I guess that would be the big thing for me, is just, it's like, to stop the insanity and the foolishness and the macho bullshit, and really focus in on getting the person in front of you better, not worse.
And that, the couple of things to unpack that I'm thinking about, number one is same thing. I think I was very fortunate to find the right people when I was younger, but I still did dumb shit. Nonetheless, yeah. Right. I hurt my back really bad, probably 15 years ago now, 15, 16. That probably made me a 10 times better coach than I was, for sure. I would just hope that most people don't have to really mess themselves up to get the insight, and that they get it through this. But the other side, I think, is kind of like walking this line. Okay, so, you got to make sure that you don't hurt people. That's, thou shalt do no harm is number one. Finding that balance of challenging people enough to, for not just for the physical aspect of it, the mental aspect of it, the growth aspect of it. How do you kind of find that now with coaching, or when mentoring coaches that are under you, and going like, okay, what's enough? Do you kind of pull back so much that now the training doesn't become, people are like, oh, I'm not being challenged enough in walking that line? Because I have that sometimes with new coaches, right? You got a person that doesn't really know, and then they push the hell out of the new 55-year-old that hasn't done much, versus some folks are like, hey, look, I feel like I'm physical therapy. Like, I feel like I want to get challenged. And in kind of finding that fine line, as soon as they go like, okay, I can't hurt people.
Yeah. I think that's what, like, if you said, okay, whatever, the Mike Boyle philosophy, the MBSC philosophy, the CFSC philosophy, whatever, I feel like that's where we are. I think we're constantly trying to say how, because I want to be as close to that line as I possibly can be. And my thing is that, the line moves as you age. Like, I had this conversation yesterday. I did a talk for a personal training group. And when you think about this, like what I would be doing with, my son is a healthy 17-year-old. And I mean, we bench press and we trap our deadlift and we hang clean and we do chin-ups, and, we do everything that I would put in the higher risk category, because they're 17 and they're young and they're resilient. But as I move forward, we talked about the fact yesterday, I said, if I have adults now, like I look at, if you're an adult, if you no longer are playing for your high school team, your college team, or playing for money, right? Then you become an adult client. And my job now is, hey, I got to make sure you feel good enough to go to work every day. So I think we've got, people talk about whatever, moving the goalposts, but we've got these kind of constantly moving goalposts that we have to look at and see, all right, and this is why we would categorize things in progressions. What in this pattern, let's just say, we're talking a knee dominant pattern. Well, what's the right target in the knee dominant pattern for this person at this age, and like our older clients, like I would say, hey, I'm not a big squat fan. I'm a really big squat fan if I've got 50-year-olds, because they got to be able to bilateral body weight squat. You know what I mean? That's where now we're back to the basics. But if someone says, well, as they get going, then, you then go to back squat. I'm like, no, we never go to back squat.
Yeah.
We're going to go body weight squat, goblet squat. And then when they can goblet squat, let's say something like 25% of their body weight, we're going to start doing unilateral stuff. But I can't start some of them at unilateral stuff because it's too hard. So we've got this continuum that we need to operate on with everybody and just look at the patterns. I don't know. Do you know Patrick Ward? But Patrick Ward was an old original strength coach guy.
He's a neighbor. He's a neighbor,
yeah, that's
man.
True. He's in your neighborhood. That's right. He is. But Patrick's wife, one time, I still remember this, and I've used it in my presentations over and over again. She was like, I figured this all out. Push, pull, do some legs, and go home. And I'm like, yeah, pretty much, but figuring out like, okay, which push, which pull, which legs, that's where the art meets the science, because I've got to be able to look at that. And like you said, someone, hey, I want to be challenged enough. I don't want to challenge this person too much. I don't want to hurt this person. All of that stuff factors into the equation, but we operate way too much, I think, in our field out of our own lens. And that's why I said it's, usually the problem are the young people who are really resilient, who've just gotten into training and then have this feeling like, oh, everybody can do this. Everybody should be able to do this. And you're kind of like, I said this the other day on Twitter, don't say you know how to train old people if you're not old. Like if you don't
saw that one.
you know what I mean? Like for you feel different getting up at 41 than you did at 21, right?
Yeah.
Getting out of bed. I feel different at 61 or 63 getting out of bed than I did at 51 or 53. And it's kind of, if you can't walk a mile in someone's shoes, at least listen to someone who has. And don't, people always say to me, oh, you're always falling back on the experience thing. I'm like, yeah, that's because I got a lot of it. So it's easy for me to fall back on that. That's an easy fallback position for me, because I can say, hey, I've done this already. I tried that didn't work. And now here's where we are. So I guess that would be the one, not the one, but I would just keep saying to people, try to learn from people who are more experienced than you and ask yourself, why are they saying what they're saying? Why does the old timer tell you that? Usually what the old timer tells you is true. I don't care what we're talking about. But when you're sitting around with an old timer, and I always use the example, when I was a kid, my brother had a trucking company and I used to work in the airport, and the loading docks would be like probably 5 feet high. And I would always jump off the loading docks, and the old timers would be like, don't do that. Like, what do you, don't do that. Perfect depth jumps. I'd be like, I'm depth jumping. I can squat 500 pounds. This is training for me. This is great. And guys would be like, I'm telling you, your knees are not going to hold up. You keep jumping off the dock like that, and then of course, about 40, I started having cartilage problems out of nowhere and my doctor's just like, yeah, your knees kind of look like broken bottles with labels on them. Your cartilage is just kind of smashed up. And I was like, I didn't really do anything. And then I think, well, I was doing some stupid shit when I was younger, and these old guys told me not to do it. So I just think it's that ability to listen. Like I had one of my friends' son ran the New York Marathon, and she said, what would you tell him? I would say, my advice would be, don't ever run a freaking marathon. No one should run a marathon. It's stupid. You're going to get hurt. It's going to cost you. And of course he's, trying to get an MRI. He's like, oh, I did something to my knee. I'm like, yeah, because, most people weren't made to run marathons.
It's interesting. A couple of things that I started doing this last year, and it was a conversation from a friend that honestly sounded somewhat like you, as far as like, we got to listen to folks with more experience. And I started, and not when I'm here as much, but when I'm on the road, when I'm at other gyms, like when I see somebody that's 50, 60, 70, and they're fit, older, they move well, I ask them, like, tell me, like, I'm just curious, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? How did you get here? Because I'm really intrigued, right? I'm intrigued, and I've been studying tons of like Peter Attia's stuff. He calls it backcasting. It's like, hey, how, what would you want the last 10 years to be like? And I've, thrown myself into that. But I started asking these questions, and kind of like the big thing was, first of all, nobody's barbell back squatting. Nobody's, deadlifting with a straight bar. You start seeing these kind of things. I'm like, okay, what else? And you see that they lift weights and they challenge themselves. Everything's joint friendly. They do some type of activity that ends up being essentially cardio, right? They eat well. And I started taking down notes. I'm like, holy shit, like this is, I'm like, these guys should have their own fucking Instagram, these guys should have their own YouTube channel and share more things. I mean, it sounds funny, right? But from what you're saying is very true. The nuggets are right there, but you go like, they don't know, we're the new generation and there's research. I'm reading all the research. Don't worry about it, old guy. You know what I mean? And it's like, you start recognizing like there's a reason why people have the knowledge that they do, especially when they've been in this game for so long, training themselves and training others. And I legitimately am like, learn more from that generation, or at least mix it up, right? Like at least get a chunk of it, because you're going to be better off training your clients and training yourself. And I mean, and here's the thing too, when I know for, your clientele, maybe a higher percentage of athletes. I wanted to ask you that. What would you say is general population versus athletes at your facilities?
60-40 probably now. Just 60 general, 40 athlete.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. So we're probably about, say 75-25 general population, but it's the same thing, right? Where the conversation tends to lean towards that maybe 1%, or 5% or whatever it may be. But most people are training, majority general population, always having conversations about how you train a person that's, the elite 1%. And I think this is where things go wrong, right? Because you bring that part back to training general population that wants to move better, look better, feel better, be healthier, be able to go to work next day, not be injured and beat up and sore for a week. And there's a disconnect, right? Because you want to, it's like, oh, I know all this stuff, so I'm going to do all this stuff with everybody. And I think sometimes it gets you into trouble. Did you have to, as you kind of progress through owning the gym, getting the newer generation in, and I know you guys do a lot of in-staff and education, what's that process been like, for instance, handing that down to your coaches so that they can apply what people need rather than like, oh, here's everything I know on this new cool stuff?
Right. Well, I think part of it is that it's a constant process, but some of it's continually reminding people, because it's really funny, and it's reminding people like, hey, Kevin Carr, who just now is one of my partners who has bought into our business, but I can still remember Kevin for a while, because we have one guy that works for us, Steve Bunker's awesome, but he still lifts really heavy. He's my age, and he's one of those guys, like I said, he's made out of like iron bands. He doesn't get hurt. And so he's the outlier, but he would be encouraging like the kids, to power lift. Oh, do some, like, try some powerlifting stuff with me. We'll do this. And I'd get aggravated, because I'm like, I don't want them doing it in the gym. I don't want people seeing it. I'm very adamant, but they still did it. But I always laugh at Kevin, because Kevin one time hurt himself, like hurt his back, like you said, really bad. He couldn't come to work. He still says, I spent like 3 days on the floor of my apartment. Crawling around, crawling to the bathroom, laying on the floor.
I know how that feels.
Yeah. And we've all done it. Right. And that's my point, is that, and that's why I've written so many of these articles. I wrote one article and I forget the title of it, but the subtitle was Slamming Your Hand in a Car Door. And basically what I said was the idea that, if you had come to me and said, I hurt my hand, I slammed it in my car door. And then you started to describe to me how you were like, my hand is getting better. I can move my fingers. I can't wait till I can go back and slam it in the door. Right? You do what you did. You laugh. You're like, oh, that's really funny. But that's squatting, right? That's bench pressing. It's amazing. People will get hurt doing something, and then we'll describe to you the process that they're going through to be able to get back to what it was that injured them. And I look at that and think that is one of the most incongruent thoughts and I always say that's like distance, runners all the time. Oh yeah, I got hurt, whatever. I got plantar fasciitis. I got an injection. I've been riding the bike. I've been running in the pool. I think I'm going to be able to start running in a week. And I'm like, you got hurt running. Doesn't that tell you anything? Maybe you got to figure out something else to do. But some people are so enamored of the activity that they can't get away from it. And I'm like you, like, it's really funny you said Peter Attia, but I've gotten really into the Peter Attia stuff because I think he's got a great messaging. And again, I think he's whacked on one end in terms of he's a crazy, he's like,
Yeah.
I was doing 12 hours of zone 2 cardio a week.
Yeah, he's
I'm
doing crazy amounts of
I'm like, I don't do 12 hours of exercise a month. You know what I mean? Like 12 hours of zone 2 cardio a week. So some of it's crazy, but I'm still listening because he talks, like you said, about his centenarian Olympics, what I want to be able to do when I'm 100. And I look at it and think I've done really well. I finally at 62, they made me start taking a statin, but it was the first time I've ever been on any medication in my life. So you look at that and you think, hey, I'm proud of that. I don't take blood pressure medication. I don't take heart medication. I don't take any of these things. And so I'm doing something right. But now I know I have, I would say, general orthopedic stuff that goes on. I am clearly achy, and stiff neck, stiff back, stiff hips, that kind of stuff. But I look at that and think a lot of that is paying for the dumb stuff I did as a kid. I could just sit here and make a list and you just laugh because you'd be like, yeah, same thing. We used to deadlift. We used to max deadlift every week, like 1 RM. That was our deadlift workout. Just warm up and keep going and try to see how much you could deadlift for one. I don't know if it gets any dumber than that. It's pretty close anyway. And then we'd go from there and we'd do, cheat shrugs with whatever we were deadlifting. We put that amount of weight in the, and I look, when I watch somebody, even when I just watch somebody do a shrug, I'm like, don't do a shrug. You don't need to do shrugs. Your traps they're not elevators. They're not made to do that. You don't need to do that. And then I see somebody, doing it with 405, and trying to snap it up like a clean pull. And I'm just thinking, you're going to be like me, sleeping with a neck pillow the rest of your life because you did this stupid shit because you wanted big traps. And, weighted dips, people, you don't like dips. I'm like, no, I freaking not. I don't like them. I hate them. They're not good for you. Their shoulder's not supposed to be in that position. And then you get into it. I did, as I said, I did this talk yesterday, the no bad exercise. There's no bad exercises. There's just bad whatever implementation. I'm like, no. There's a lot of bad exercises. And as you get older, the list of what's bad gets longer. Say, what's a bad exercise for a 12-year-old? There's probably not that many. They're pretty mobile. Not a lot of water under the bridge. Bad exercise for a 62-year-old? How much time you got? You know what I mean?
That's a great point.
Them off.
That's a great point, though, because, kind of like the whole conversation of folks that I talk to that are older, like what are the exercises they're doing? And well, put it this way, a lot of different ones. There's differences, but I tell you what, the list of what was okay before, none of that's on the list later. And I'm almost, it's kind of like boxing. Okay. So it's like MMA and boxing, right? In boxing, you can go for a lot of rounds, but you get hit a lot of times and it's probably worse for your brain than MMA. You get choked out, you get knocked out. I feel like in training, I'm almost grateful that I got hurt pretty damn bad pretty soon. And the reason I say that is because I changed my training faster. And if you go longer, it's kind of like boxing, right? You do dumb shit for longer and it slowly kind of builds up. And then you got all these different issues that you got to deal with later on. Cause you got, joint overuse and shit, all this wear and tear, and it's popping up everywhere. At least that's my analogy for
I think it's almost more like addiction. Like the more you do and the harder it is to get off of it, because the more you are convinced that this is the way to do it, and you can't see the forest because of the trees. You can't look at it and think, wait a second, this, or you do know, this isn't good for me, but I can't stop myself from doing it. And I think there's a huge amount of that in our field. And that's what I think, like you talked about, do no harm. I think we have a responsibility as professionals to help people to not injure themselves. And that means exercise selection becomes really, really important. And as you said, you don't want it to be so easy that the person isn't challenged. But for us, for instance, I said, our adult clients don't touch an Olympic bar. And I never really thought about it until someone was asking me about bars and racks, and I was like, yeah, I mean, our racks basically chin-ups. Our adults, the vast majority of our adults don't do chin-ups anymore. None of them bench press with a barbell. None of them deadlift with a barbell. None of them squat with a barbell. But everybody does really heavy pulling. Everybody does, a challenging level of pressing. Everybody does challenging lower body exercises. It's just the tool that we're going to choose is going to be something that's more user-friendly for that person. And we're going to realize that it doesn't matter. Double body weight squat for a guy that works in an office doesn't really matter. Being able to get up from the floor matters. Being able to squat down to the toilet matters. So, being able to do a lunge, being able to do a step up, being able to do even rear foot elevated split squats, that stuff matters. But whether or not that guy can get 400 pounds on a bar on his back, completely irrelevant in terms of day-to-day, even living a really good, vigorous life. It doesn't matter. I don't even think it matters for athletes anymore. I look at the athletes and think we were probably really misguided, even with the athlete stuff at certain points in time. We chase strength. I wrote another article called Training an Athlete for 18 Years because I had one of my guys who played, I think he played in the NHL till he was 37, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think, no, 35. So I started training him at 18. I trained him till he was 35. And when he came in as an 18-year-old, he was really strong. Actually, his name's Jay Pandolfo. He's now the head coach at Boston University. But he could bench press 300 pounds as a freshman in college. And I remember looking at him thinking, I don't care if you ever bench more than 300 pounds. It's like, as a hockey player, 300 is great. Don't worry about it. We got a lot of other things to worry about. But by 35, we weren't cleaning anymore. We weren't squatting anymore. He wasn't barbell bench pressing anymore. It was just, hey, let's just get ready to go back and play another season. And let's figure out the joint friendly push, the joint friendly pull, the joint friendly knee dominant, all these things that we can do to get you prepared to play another year in the NHL. And when you go through that process with somebody, one, you start to realize, well, he's still playing. He's 35. He's still there. So obviously, the 300 bench really didn't matter because he hasn't done that since freshman year of college or junior year of college or whatever it was. And even, the 20 chin-ups, that doesn't really matter because, he's had, third degree shoulder separation, chin-ups, maybe you don't feel that good anymore. And he's doing ring rows instead because it's, again, more joint friendly. And you just realize that it's about getting strong and getting fit in the way that best suits you at that particular time.
And I mean, those are all great points. And I started wondering too, first of all, if you have any type of pain or discomfort, you actually can't push anyways. It's just, a conversation that just gets overlooked. I'm like, we're going to go hard in the squat. Well, let me tell you, as soon as the bar is on my back, my brain's like, I remember that injury. I remember that thing. I'm not going to be able to produce a lot of force. But now, get me into a belt squat, a double kettlebell squat. I'm like, oh, this was so much better. Guess what? I'm gonna be able to push it, right? What helped me really program better for general population is small group personal training, because we have like groups of 16 people. And I never know, who's gonna be a new person that comes into class. So when these programs are done, you got to think about having the right kind of like regression and kind of base level exercise so that everybody can do it. Like I got somebody completely new coming in, and the thing is, I'm like, I don't want anybody to get injured. There's a lot of people. I got to be able to coach this. And because of that, the programming started becoming like, okay, less of this, no straight bar deadlifts, no straight bar barbell bench press, no this, no that. And I've watched it over the years, and I'm like, man, like nobody's gotten hurt. Results keep getting better. People are not beat up. But it was because you started thinking about like the group of people. Because, I got a 23-year-old, but then I got a 57-year-old. I got a lady that just walked in that's 62. Like, how do I make sure that I get them fit, strong, all this, and not, make sure I follow rule number one, thou shalt.
I have to apologize. Wait, can you hear my dog barking in the background?
A little bit.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
There's something beeping. And I don't know if it's something outside my house, but it's making my dog bark. I apologize. But no, you're right. And that's our program. That's our adult program. What you're describing is exactly what, and that's, again, I go back to like the old Anthony Robbins things, right? Success leaves clues.
Mhm.
When you were talking earlier about people being successful in the fitness business, well, what do? You look at guys like you or me and say, how were they successful in the fitness business? How did they do this? How did they program? That's what the biggest key to being successful in any endeavor is. I always say cheating, right? I'm like Mike Boyle University, cheating will be class number one. Because the sooner you learn to cheat and the better you get at it, the more successful you will be. Because everybody's out there. If you think, whether it's like, Mark Fisher with the Unicorn Society or whatever anybody's doing, there's so much information out there that's available to you about how people are successfully conducting their businesses. And you literally described your programming situation, and you described exactly what ours is. Okay, I've got a 24-year-old. I got a 24-year-old girl who just got done playing college hockey or college basketball or whatever it is. And she's in the same group with a 57-year-old guy who runs an insurance company. How do I program for them? And that's why we always talk about our idea around like progression, regression. It's like, okay, up on the board is a knee dominant exercise. It might be split squat. It might be rear foot elevated split squat, whatever it is. What you need to be able to know as a coach is where on this continuum is this particular person in terms of making that challenging. Is it just a situation of, am I challenging them with load? Am I making the position easier? Am I making the position harder? And to me, it seems really simple. And then I watch what other people are doing, and I think, how can people not get it when we're offering it up to them effectively over and over again, either for free or for really low cost relative to the cost of kind of doing business?
And do you think, I mean, this is, I don't know, I ask myself that question, right? Is it an ego thing? Because it's like, those guys, like, we go hard here. But it's like, if I get somebody to go into my, training session, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be smart. Right. And I think sometimes that's that's the part of it, is the ego part. And maybe because, like you said, there's a Mike Bowles, a pussy club. It's like, I'm not going to do what that guy does. He's a pussy. So like, I'm not, it's such, I mean, really you're shooting yourself in the foot. Like, what do you think that 41 years of training will lead you to a worse decision for your clients? It's like, I don't think so.
No, exactly. And but I think, like you said, the ego thing, but our field is a field that's built on ego. It really is much more so than a lot of other fields, in terms of, you don't see a lot of guys like saying, hey, I'm a computer programmer, and they've got a picture of themselves like holding up their MacBook with no shirt on. You know what I mean? It's like, that's just not how it is. But like in our field, it's very much like, that's what I always say to people, even, when we're talking about hiring or finding a trainer or whatever it is. I'm like, don't end up with some dick where it's all about them. And we have so many of those people, because they, people, whenever anybody says to me, well, I want to go into this field because I love to work out. I'm like, that's a shitty reason to go into this.
That's not it.
Yeah. If you love to work out, then, devote 8 hours a week to it and have at it and find a job. But I want people to say, I want to go into this field because I really love helping people. I like helping other people. I tell our coaches, if you love to work out, you won't like working here, because we don't give you a lot of time to work out. If you get an hour a day, you're going to be really lucky. You're going to do a good job with your schedule. And there's going to be a lot of times where you think, I would say our average coach, bangs in a 15-minute lift somewhere during the course of the day, where they find it, 1 or 2 exercises to do hard. And then they might jump on the bike and bang out some intervals, and that's working out. It's not, I got 2 hours. I had one of my friends who was really struggling in business, and one of the things that he told me, he said, yeah, it's really hard for me to get my 2 hours in for myself during the middle of the day. And I was thinking, no wonder you're struggling in business. I mean, if your day is revolving around 2 hours for you to eat and lift and shower and do all the stuff that you need to do, you're not going to succeed in this business. The fact, I don't know anybody who's good who has 2 hours a day to themselves to do that stuff.
Actually, you know what? Because I want to dive into fitness business later, but because you're on this point, when it comes to hiring and seeing the people that do well at the beginning. So let's say you're talking about hiring and building that career and starting off their first years. What are the things that you see and look for from the coaches, you're like, hey, listen, these guys are going to be successful from a standpoint of character, but also just, mindset and perspective. And of course, like you kind of lead them into that direction. But it's almost like, hey, if you're getting into this, listen to Mike. This is the stuff that's going to help you be successful. The mindset, the characteristics. Because look, I'm also in a phase where sometimes I get frustrated and I struggle with, I would say new hires and things like that. But I really love your insight on that.
I mean, for me, number one, personality. I always start out with the idea, I can make you smarter. I can't make you nicer. It's going to be very difficult for me to change your basic personality. So I always, I jokingly say, I can look at people and think, I don't want bodybuilders. I don't want powerlifters. I don't want Olympic lifters. I don't want anybody whose hobby is working out. Like, to me, those used to be things that we would think were assets if we saw them on a resume. Now I look at them as negatives. When someone says, oh, I'm a body. Well, one, if I'm a bodybuilder, I'm like, okay, you're probably a drug guy. I definitely don't want you around. Bang. I'm going to automatically. So if you're thinking about your resume, leave bodybuilding out, right? Leave it out, right? And even to some degree, if you're a power lifter or if you're an Olympic lifter, leave that stuff out, because I don't look at those as strengths anymore. What I really want, like, I think if I'm looking, I would probably like someone who was involved in team sports in high school, but maybe wasn't good enough to play in college. Because I think, again, those people have learned some life lessons already that other people don't learn when they get to be, a 4-year scholarship guy, let's say 4-year scholarship guy in basketball. That guy's probably not going to be a great employee. He's probably had his ass kissed now for going on 12 years. And he's going to really struggle to enter into the work world and be like a normal dude and, when want to help other people. Right. So I think all of that stuff really matters. I like guys. I've found that I don't care about grades. I have not found any correlation at all between academic excellence and the ability to be a good coach or a good trainer. And I may have found some negative correlation over time, but I don't think I've ever found any positive correlation. So people are probably thinking like, he doesn't care if he doesn't care if you're into working out. He doesn't care if you have good grades. What does he care about? I care that you're the type of person that someone really wants to spend an hour with. That's the biggest asset from a business standpoint for me, because what we're going to effectively do is have people pay to hang out with you by the hour, right? Because that's what it is. Now, you have to look fit. You have to work out. You have to be into exercise, but you can't be so into you that you can't be into them. I think that's the difference. I always say like I'm always leery to them. Like, I'm leery of broccoli chicken guy. I'm leery of like meal prep guy. You know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks to me about how much they can lift or about what they're going to eat or about any of that stuff, I'm always like, those are like the lights go off the radar. It's like, no, probably not going to like this guy. If he's telling me that, I got 10 cans of tuna in the fridge ready to go and chicken breast. And I'm like, great. And you're going to be telling me, let me know what your body fat is. Like, I care. I could give a shit, right? What your body fat is. I could care less how much you can bench. Like, and that's what I mean. But that's so much of our field. And so you almost think you're eliminating a huge amount of the people. And I look and think, yeah, I absolutely am. I'm eliminating. That's why our staff's so good, because I've eliminated a huge amount of the people.
That's such good advice. I think it was talking to Andrew Coates that said one of the markers for knowing that a coach is successful, watch the body language and energy of their clients. Are they having a good time? Are they feeling good and having a good time during the session? You don't hear that a lot, right? Like, it's like, hey, is the programming good? Are they getting results? And it's like, look, that's important, yes. But if they're looking like they're enjoying themselves, even if it's challenging, but they're enjoying themselves, they're going to keep coming back. They're going to come back longer than, the other client that's not enjoying themselves, and they're going to get better results. So, that's definitely a big one and a big marker to look at. Have you ever heard of the 51er rule that Danny Meyer talks about?
No,
I literally feel like you explained. So Danny Meyer is the guy that started Shake Shack, but he's like one of the most famous restaurateurs of our time. One of my favorite business books is called Setting the Table. And he talks about 51ers. He said, look, if you have all the technical knowledge about a skill, so let's say in training, your programming and coaching cues and X's and O's and nutrition, that's 49 out of 100 points, right? And that can be learned. I can teach you 49, right? 51, that's basically empathy, compassion, teamwork. You're a learner, you're curious, you want to improve, you always want to improve. And he calls this the hospitality reflex. So, just like if I drop this and I'd catch it, people that have a hospitality reflex, like they want to serve you, right? They're like, their tendency is to serve. And he's like, I can teach you to 49. I can't teach you to 51. So I look for 51ers. And it's like, that's, man, it took, first 10 years, I didn't, I thought that was like, that's cool. And then the next almost 10 years, I'm like, man, that is probably one of the most on point analogies I ever heard. And like you explained it very, very well. Eliminate this. And it sounds harsh, but it's like, if your main goal is to, improve the life of your clients, make sure to keep coming back. And at the end of the day, for your business to be successful, then that's the kind of lens you got to look at things through.
Exactly. And that, like I said, and I go back to that idea. It's going to be really hard. And like you said, you look back, it's going to be hard for me to make you nicer, because I tried to save some people and make them, because I thought, they got a lot of what I need. And then I realized, but they don't, like you said, they got 49% of what I need, but I can never get the 51 into them. And then I realized after that, it's always backwards. Like, you can't flip it. At least in my situation, I've never been.
No, I mean, it's like
I'm going soft skills all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Are you a person who likes people, who likes to work, who, as you said, who's eager to serve? Are you the person? I watch people all the time. I watch everything in terms of, do they clean up? Do they pick up stuff off the floor? Do they walk over things that are, I'm on my kids about that stuff all the time. And, they're younger, so they don't quite get it yet, but realizing what makes a really good employee. And it's interesting. So one of my favorite books is First Break All the Rules. Have you read First Break All the Rules?
Yeah, excellent book.
Yeah. So, but the things that they talk about, like why people stay, money's not in the top 10. What's in the top 10 is, does somebody care about me at work? Do I have a friend at work? Do I have the tools that I need to be able to do my job? There are all these things that are in the top 10 that have nothing to do with money. So I'm always thinking, I want to get the right people. Then I want to give them all that stuff that's going to make them want to stay, because they're never going to get, like you said, you're going to make a lot of money. They're probably not going to get rich working for us, realistically speaking, but they can have a really fulfilling career and really enjoy their work. And what you realize, like someone like me, I've enjoyed my work. I have that feeling of, wow, I've never really thought, oh God, I got to go to work. I never got up with that mindset.
Same.
And I've seen so many people, people who can't wait to retire. People like, I can't wait till I got my 20 in and I can retire, or my 25 or whatever it is. And I think, wow, I'm at like 41 and I am starting to think about it, but more because I'm just getting old. You know what I mean? I'm getting old and tired, but I'm not enjoying the work.
Yeah.
I still enjoy the work very much.
And what the thing is like, for me, and like, I've been doing it for a long time, but I look at you and I say, shit, that's how I want to feel, in 20 years. It's like, I do a lot of things, but I never get up in the morning and go like, oh, I really don't want to train this team and these folks and run. Like, I never do that, and of course it's, as business is hard. You're going to have some challenging times and some crazy shit happen, but there's a difference between that and going like, I just dislike this, right? I'm doing it just because I got to do it to put food on the table. And I get that part too. But ideally what you do is work towards something where you're like, this is meaningful and I really enjoy doing this, and life will be better if you do that. If you go to work for 8 to 10 hours a day, whatever it may be, and you love what you do, you enjoy what you do, versus you go to work, you hate what you do, but you get a paycheck. That's about half of your life right there. I think that's, I'm not buying into that, right? Like, okay, cool. I'll exchange half of my life for, so I'm very grateful to be able to do this. And I do think this is a special industry. But it's also, the reason why I love having these conversations for people to hear. One, is it for them? And two, like, if you're in business, what are you looking for? Because it'll make your business and everything much better. Because I'm just in a process of writing a book, and I'm kind of like the 3 C's to me are like the foundation of everything, right? It's coaching, customer experience, and culture. And that drives the 3 R's, which is results, retention, and referrals, right? Like if you get that right, I think that's a really good foundation. I'm not saying it's, there's nothing else to worry about, but and what you're saying too is like, to get those right, you got to have the right people.
Right.
I mean, period. And that, but this is, I'm very intrigued about this because how long you been in business now as far as the gym?
Private business, 26 years.
26, man.
Yeah.
So almost 3 decades. It's like, what, because there's a couple, I actually don't want to just ask about the gym. Because through that time, you've just seen a lot, but like, I wanted to get your thoughts on like, today to be successful in this industry. And let's call success. You love what you're doing. You're busy. You can make a career. You make enough money to cover everything that you need and a little bit extra. It's like, and most importantly, like you love what you're doing. What does it take for that? What do you think are the key things to have success in the fitness industry? If kind of what I just mentioned is
I think some
success.
people won't like the answer because I think you have to be willing to work a lot of hours when you're young.
Man.
I think if you're not, I think if you're somebody, I would say if you're looking for like the 40-hour week and, health insurance and all that stuff, you should probably go work for the city, right? Whatever town you're in, like get a job working for your town or your city, or get a job working for the state and punch your clock for 40 hours a week and get all your benefits. And that will be your life. In our world, I think you've got to be willing to have you got to have a little bit of that hustle factor early on. And so if you want to be successful, that might mean 2 jobs. I mean, I worked 2 jobs till I was 52. I was running actually probably 3 jobs really, but I was working for a sports team and running my business up until I was 52 years old. I left the Red Sox at 52. And that was the first time I'm like, wow, I'm just going to go to one place. Like I'm just going to go to the gym today and I'm going to come home. And I don't have to go anywhere else. I don't have to worry about anything else. I don't have anything else on my plate. And I still did have stuff like, perform better and speaking and writing. Like there was all these other things that I was doing, but it wasn't I didn't have 2 actual jobs. So I do think you've got to be willing to hustle. And you need, again, when you're looking for somebody, it's the same thing. I look at people, when people come to me talking about jobs and they start asking about, benefits and hours and things like that. I'm the same way. It's like I put my fingers in my ears. I'm like, oh God, I can't listen to this person. You know what I mean? We're not on the same wavelength. If you're 22 years old and you're worried about, do we work Saturdays? When do we come in? When do we get off? I'm like, this is not for you. Like fitness is, particularly in the beginning, it can be like a 12-hour a day job. It can be a split shift job where, you think I'm going to work 6 to 10 and then I might work 4 to 9. And then maybe I can go out with my buddies or do whatever I want to do after that. But so I think there is a certain type of person that is going to be drawn into this field and going to be able to succeed. But then the next step is that person has to learn. The number one thing you have to learn, which I wish I'd learned it sooner, you have to learn to invest. And I know you know this because you're into the real estate world like I am, right? I've been flipping houses. My daughter has lived in 25 houses. She's 23 years old, maybe more than 25 houses. So when we started out, I mean, I would sell a house. If the house price went up 12 grand, I'd sell it. And people, you'd sell a house for $12,000. And I'm like, my first job was $12,000. Right. So if I could make $12,000 on one real estate transaction, I was making that transaction and I was on to the next one. And I mean, my daughter doesn't remember, but my daughter is 23. She lived in a couple of houses that we moved into that were real bomb shelters, like houses that one of them didn't have like a back wall going out to the deck. The door had fallen, the patio door had fallen out and it had plastic taped up over it. And I've had people come by literally and be like, you live here? I'm like, yeah, I'm fixing this house up and I'm going to sell it. And I'm going to make a lot of money. And we've done that, every turn of the wheel, we made money. We invested that money because the key, and I'm going to tell you this and you already know it, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway, because I had a friend of mine. I was very, very lucky. I had a friend who was in the investment business that used to work out at the gym. And one of the things that he said was, Mike, he said, you won't understand money until you get to critical mass. And I remember looking at him, I might've been, maybe I was a little short of 40, 35, 36, 37, whatever it was. And his name was Mike too. And I was like, I don't get it. He goes, no, you really won't. He said, because you won't understand the power of money until you have a lot of money. And I just remember thinking like, but because he was like, he was like, how much money you got in your retirement fund? And I was like, I don't know, 20,000 maybe. And he was like, so if that money doubled, you'd have 40,000. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. He was like, right, that would be great. He said, but if you had 2 million and it did the same thing and it doubled, you'd have 4 million. He said, that would be a really significant event in your life. And then he started talking to me. It's like Darren Hardy, compound effect and slight edge and all that stuff. So he's talking about compound interest. He said, at some point late in your life, you're going to have a relatively large amount of money. He said, and that amount of money is going to double every 7 years. If you're not an idiot, basically is the way to go. If you're not a total moron, you're going to double your money every 7 years. And he said, and the last 2 turns of the wheel will be significant. And I was, again, I didn't really get it. And then all of a sudden around 50, I remember looking and thinking, wow, we've got, let's just say we'll take 500,000 as a round number. We got 500,000. That's pretty good. And then looking at 57 and I went, hey, we're millionaires. That's crazy. The 500,000 that doubled, we're millionaires. And then realizing, 64 is coming up. It's like, wait a second. Now we're double millionaires. We get $2 million. Those last couple turns make a really big difference, but it's all based on starting investing when you're young, and people say stuff like, buy a house, open a Roth IRA, and everybody's kind of like, la, 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 I don't hear you. Who cares? But you realize that, wow, when you get to the end, like where I am, you're going to go, holy shit, they were right. And that's another, it's like the no back squat thing. Do you know what I mean? Like people think,
Yeah.
if you don't start saving money till you're 40, you're screwed. Unless you're making a lot of money, right? And it goes back, and we've probably read all the same books, but if you think about The Wealthy Barber, there's a lot of really good, simple finance books, right? They tell you save 10% of your income. That seems really simple. But if you save 10% and you make 10%, that starts to get really substantial over time. And because I got to the point where I was making enough money where it was getting hard to save 10% of my income.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not as easy. Like it was, if you're making 20,000, can I save 2,000? Well, yeah, I probably can. If I'm making 200,000, can I save 40? It's like, well, that's a lot, to save. But if you still keep trying to do that same thing, and because that, now you're going 20% a year, that makes that number go crazy really, really fast. So I guess that would be the biggest thing. If you're going to be in a field where you aren't destined to make a lot of money, then you need to have a plan in place to make a lot of money. I even talk about, I tell our guys all the time, and they don't do it. Buy a multifamily house. My family did not live in a single family house until after my daughter was born. So it was 22 years ago was the first time I bought a single family house. I had tenants, I had, rental apartments, and it was just part of the deal. Cause I remember thinking, I can live for free. If I buy a 3-family house, I can live for nothing.
Well, where did you, for instance, who was the person that made you go like, hey, you should probably invest in real estate or just investments in general?
Honestly, I found there's a book. I'm trying to think of the name. And it's How to Become Financially Successful by Investing in Real Estate is the name of the book. And I'd have to look on Amazon to think it. The author's name is not coming to me, but my college best friend, his family, his dad was a phys ed teacher. But his grandfather was a multimillionaire based on rental real estate down in Connecticut. And he started talking about the idea, we should buy a 2-family, you and me, we should pool our money, get a 2-family. And I thought, it's not a bad idea. So then I went to the bookstore and bought this book, How to Become Financially Successful by Investing in Real Estate. And then you start to realize, again, you start to understand compound interest, you start to understand other people paying your mortgage. You start to understand the concept of equity. You start to understand, one of the first lessons they tell you is that, hey, isn't it crazy that, like in the days of 5% down, for $5,000, you could buy an asset valued at $100,000. Like, imagine if I said to you, hey, Luca, I'll sell you $100,000 for $5,000. But that's real estate.
Let me get 20 of those. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. That's real estate. And then someone said, and by the way, real estate's probably going to go up faster than most other things in terms of its appreciation. And you're going to get appreciation based on the fact that you bought $100,000 in real estate, but you bought it for 5,000. So you look and think, well, wait a second, I'm going to make my money back in the first year. You're like, yep, you'll definitely make your down payment back in the first year if it goes up 5%, and in 2 years, now you're selling at a profit, in 3, it's like, and that's what we did. And the truth is, I look at some of them and think, God, if I'd held on to some stuff longer, I'd be really rich. But I'm not bad off right now. I'm doing okay. So I'm not crying by any stretch of the imagination. But it's, and the other one, I just bought Millionaire Next Door for my like senior staff guys, and talked about the idea, and again, I say it to you, you nod your head because you've read them all too. You're like me, you're like it's like talking to a younger version of myself. But when you look at that and think, the millionaire next door lives in a more modest house. He drives a more modest car. He eats at more modest restaurants. There are all these things that the millionaire next door does, because the whole idea of the millionaire next door is you don't know, like maybe my friends that I live with here, in my hometown would not know that I have a lot of money stashed away someplace, because I don't live like I have a lot of money stashed away someplace. Most of the time they see me, I'm in what I'm in right now. I'm in a gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, and I drive a modest car. I got the new Bronco, which I really like. It's a cool car, but it's a $45,000 car. It's not a $145,000 car. I've never had, even with my kids, they've always been like, could we live in a house like that? And I'm like, yeah, we could. You never will, but we could. But in your lifetime, that won't happen. But as a result, like, they've always had a lake house. As long as they've been alive, they've had a place to go in the summer on a lake, because I'm like, I'd rather have 2 houses, rather than one McMansion that I'm paying for, to up to here.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather have 2 modest houses, but have one of them be someplace on the water that I can go to get away. And so I think, and sorry, I'm probably getting super tangential on you here, but
No, this is good.
There's so much of this that you need to have foresight. And it's probably going to be in your 30s that it's going to really kick in. I think in your 20s, you're going to be an idiot. You're going to be like, whatever, looking for a wife or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever it is. And just, roaming the streets and spending your money on beer and pizza. But all of a sudden, when you get to about 30, you got to sit down and have a long, hard conversation with yourself and say, wait a second, how's this whole thing going to end?
No, I'm going to start with the second thing first and then go to the first part, because it's almost like, look, here's the 2 things. But financial literacy and just understanding of money, I think just in general is a skill set that's not taught enough, let alone in this industry, I think, because you don't get the 401k and the matching 401k from the company and whatever else. Not to even say I think that's a great investment, but you just don't have that conversation, and you just kind of live day to day, week to week, month to month, and don't go like, okay, but what about, when you hit, fill in the blank, 35, 40, 45, I got kids, I got a family, and understanding, because that was, a person taught me, just richest man in Babylon, 10%.
There you go.
And then, and then it was like, just the understanding of initially when we started a gym in Slovenia, I came here, independent contractor, and everybody's like, great, I'm going to make more money. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, you're not going to pay, the company's not going to pay taxes for you. You're going to have to pay those taxes, right? So it was like 10% has got to go there. And then you got to take a whole chunk out to make sure that when the tax man comes, you can pay them. We'd have coaches at the end of the year going like, holy shit, I got to pay 20 grand to taxes. And I was like, yeah, your check was bigger, but like, that's not all your money. And how, and then if you're going to put stuff on the side and invest in yourself, and right, that dollar is not your dollar. Some of it should go to investments and savings and to taxes. But there literally was no understanding of that or desire to really understand that. And to get to a point, I'm very big on whether if you're a gym owner for sure. But even if you're a coach, like you said, real estate, for me, it was like, I didn't buy myself a house. I bought a building. Good debt versus bad debt. It's like now every, for 6 years, every dollar I put in is equity. Price goes up. The real estate company makes money. It's like, how can I make this thing work for me? If I'm going to do that, I love this industry and this business, but how can I make it work for me? And you got to start thinking about that. I think ASAP, and for me, I teach the team. I'm like, listen, guys, just some simple constructs. When you make your money, start putting it aside. You want to learn more about where I'll give you my opinions. I mean, I'm very geeky and study this stuff a lot, but if you can start doing this now, you'll be better off, because the person thinks, well, I will, but when I make more money. It's like, no, it's a skill set. It's not about making more. Like, if, one of my mentors, Chips Warzel, was like, if you make $1, 10 cents, 20 cents goes on the side. And he's like, you understand, I know you're probably laughing when I'm telling this to you, but he's like, do that, because it's not about the 20 cents. It's about the habit of doing that. And then when 20 cents, a dollar becomes 1,000 and 10,000, 100,000, now it really makes a big difference.
Right.
But it will be normal, because you're so used to doing it. And it's too easy to go like, well, I don't really make a lot of money, so why would I do that? I'll wait till I get more money.
You're right. I mean, you said that's the richest man in Babylon thing, right? I remember my wife when I used to have the 10% account, and because at that time we were bartending and waitressing, and it would be like, we'd come home, $100. Okay, give me 10.
Yes. Hell yes.
We'd stick that 10 away, and like that 10's that's going to buy a house. We're going to buy real estate with that. We're going to take the 10% money. The 10% money is going to become our real estate money. And then, we're going to move forward from there. And we did those things. And it's the same way. I mean, my wife, I have huge admiration for my wife, because she's the same way. I mean, she could be living like a princess if she wanted to. And my wife literally still goes to thrift stores. She's 57 years old, and she'll go back and show me, I got this sweater for $3. And I'm like saying, you can buy what you want, She's like, I know. She said, but I love the idea that I got a cashmere sweater for $3 at this store. And I'm like, great. But that's the way that we live, and that's the way that we teach our kids to live. And as a result, we live really well, because we can spend money on the things that we want to spend money on. And you don't end up, so many people, again, and this, but there's so many people in America who make a lot of money, and that's what, that's the millionaire next door, but they don't have the net worth, because, because they've bought the car, and because they've bought the house, they've done all these things that they shouldn't have done. And then they just keep getting a raise, and the raise just keeps going. The raise raises their lifestyle. That's what people say. I'm going to put a new kitchen in, and I'm kind of like, gonna put a new kitchen. You're gonna spend $100,000 to put a kitchen in or something like that. I think, and even for us, like my wife and I, the house I'm sitting in right now, I mean, we did the house over literally ourselves. Like when we put a new kitchen in, but we got at the kitchen. We took the kitchen floor up, we pulled the floor up. I mean, and the floors, I'm looking at right now. You go out there and look at the floor. I put that floor down. I literally spent probably 30 hours on my hands and knees. I'd never put a floor down before, but the whole house needed to be floored, and I'm like, it's like putting a puzzle together. I think I can figure it out. So I bought a staple gun and carried a bunch of boxes of flooring in. And we, again, she and I carried all the flooring in, and people would look at us and be like, you guys are crazy. And I look and think I'm crazy like a fox, because the money that I'm not spending to have some guy, pay him $10,000 to put my floors in, goes into my real estate purchase. And it's, my regret, like you bought your building, Boston, we never were able to buy a building because the commercial real estate out here is in such an insane place that there was never an opportunity. And honestly, that's our biggest business struggle, is our rent is crazy. We have 22,000 square feet between the two facilities. We've got 30,000 square feet. We pay a lot of money in rent. We got to generate a lot of revenue just to pay the rent.
Yeah. That's definitely, I mean, and look, I always go, because people would say stuff like that and go like, well, how am I supposed to do that? Well, the faster you think about it, if you buy a spot that's 3,000 square feet or 5,000 square feet, you're still, it's yours, and you can grow out of it, and then you can lease it to somebody else, and you can do a lot of things with it. Right. I just think the point that you made, I think that's very powerful, is like, you have intent, you're like, hey, this is going to go into a real estate account. We're going to save here. We're going to do that. We're going to flip it. And I think folks need to start doing that as soon as possible in this industry. I definitely think there needs to be, I try to talk a lot about that, because there needs to be more resources for folks to hear this in this industry as much as possible. Now, this brings me to point number one. And, you're like, I'm going to sound crazy, I just feel like you're just, in my head about this one, that when you start, I don't think that there's really any way to get ahead and be really successful if you're not willing to put in hours. And the idea of what the hours are, because this is just one of the things I've seen, right? Like, hey, I want to be in the fitness industry, but I kind of want to do, 15, 20 hours a week and do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I'm like, if you really want to get great, I think you can't even have that mindset of an hour limit, right? I mean, seriously, that's my
Honestly, I think when you're young, you probably, it may sound wrong, but there needs to be some time when you're exhausted. I can remember, even when I was at BU, I can remember sleeping on the floor in my office, just going in and laying down and being like, oh my God, I just need to sleep for an hour, and thinking I got an hour right now and I'm just going to lay here, and set my alarm and go to sleep for an hour. Like, if you don't, when you're young, if you're not willing to work really hard, you're never going to be able to work really hard, because that's when you have the best capacity to do that. But I learned that too. I mean, my father was a high school teacher, high school principal, but same thing, coached football, coached basketball, in the spring, he umpired softball. And his standard joke was, no self-respecting guy has one job. He would always say that, whenever he knew anybody, because he got one job. He goes, no self-respecting guy has one job. And I grew up listening to that, and it didn't have an effect on me till I was older. And then I realized, Jesus, he's right. In terms of, like, I was tending bar, I was a strength coach, and my wife and I worked every weekend, probably from the time we were 21 till the time we were 30. I worked across the street from Fenway Park. That's why I used to joke, it was unbelievable that I ended up working for the Red Sox. I won a World Series ring literally across the street from the bar that I worked at.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In my 20s. And, it's like, but we were making, we'd make, I don't even know, God, we'd make $500, $600, $700 in a weekend which at that time, you're talking about the 1980s, that was a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But I remember I'd work Friday night, Saturday day, Saturday night, Sunday day when the Red Sox were in town, in addition to being at BU coaching during the week. And so I would probably put in as much, I'd put in another 25, 30 hours over the weekend, but I'd make $300, $400, $500 for that 25, 30 hours. Again, that was a lot of money that went into that 10% account. It was also a lot of money that went into Bud Lights and things for me, because, you get into that lifestyle. but we learned to hustle, and we learned to save, and we learned to work 2 jobs. We learned to work doubles. We learned to, that's all the stuff that you need to learn. And it made regular work really easy for me.
See, that's a really great point. And I think it's the skill set of that. Like, what, if you know what it's like to, coach for 50 to 60 hours or whatever else, just work your ass off and work really hard. Like, it builds capacity. And then again, other things start becoming like, oh, I've done that. I can do that. Right. As you go older. And then there's this other part. Like, I look at coaching as a skill set, right? It's just kind of like, I used to play basketball. You want to get better at shooting and dribbling and being great on the court. What do? You put in hours of work. And if you're, I don't know, in 5 years, you do 15 hours of deliberate coaching, and I do, per week, and I do 50. I mean, it's a compound effect of how much better somebody's going to be at that. And then you kind of look back and go like, well, why is this person packed and successful and saving money and being able to do all these things? And it's like, I've yet to find, I've tried to figure this one out, but I haven't found a person that hasn't bust their ass for a long time at the beginning to then be more successful at other stuff later. Right. And I've had so many conversations, and I keep trying to, everybody's going to say the same thing that's, been in this game for a long time. It's like, look, at the beginning, you got to put in hours. And I love that you say that, because like, I want it to be repetitive. It's like that saying, people need to be reminded more than need to be taught. I think this is part of it. It's like, I hope people hear it again and again and again.
Yeah. I mean, the people that I like, if I think of Alan Cosgrove or Todd Durkin or Mark Verstegen, or, people that have built up businesses, they're all people that they took risks and they worked hours. Like, you've got to be willing to take risks, and you've got to be willing to work hours, because and you shouldn't, the harder part will be undoing that when you get older, not letting that define you. And that's what I'm working on now, myself, is I'm working on not being defined by that. Like I struggle with the fact that I don't go to work for as many hours now. I struggle with that. There are
I
days
feel
when I
you.
think I should go in. I mean, like even today I'm thinking, yeah, when I get done with Luca, I might just go in and like stick my head in for an hour to see what's going on. Just to let people know that I'm around. But yet I'll go in there. I mean, I'll train a client. I have a client tomorrow morning at 7:30. 7:30.
See, I was going to ask you that. How much do you still coach?
Not that much, honestly. I have one personal training client who I've had on and off for like 25 years. He's a 72-year-old doctor, and I've been training him, I feel like literally forever. I always said, it's we're either going to have to get divorced or one of us is going to have to die. Like, I don't know how the relationship is. It kind of, it's just like two grumpy old men. But now his wife comes with him, and his wife, they're both in incredible shape. They've been in my Instagram. They look like they're 50. But I train them. I have a group of girls, kind of elite level women, a lot of them playing women's professional ice hockey, some of them playing on the national team. I got a couple of girls that are on the women's national lacrosse team. I'm in with them in the morning, and then I have my son and his friends. And that's basically what I do from a training standpoint. So whatever number of hours they're training, that's how many hours I'm working the rest of the time. Other than that, I hang around. I always say I'm everybody's assistant. I'm the janitor. I'm the maintenance guy. Half the people, like the kids, some of the kids that lately, the last couple of years, there's a couple of kids who've said that I was dead. They were like, Mike Boyle's dead. You're not Mike Boyle. He's dead. This place is
Oh,
named
no,
after.
see,
I've had
that makes you a living legend.
Yeah, literally. I've had to show my ID to a kid, to show him like, no, I'm because people would be like, one girl came up to one of the coaches and said, some random old dude just came over and said something to me. And they were like, well, what did he say? He said, keep the bar closer. And they were like, random old dude. They were like, ratty sweatshirt. She was like, yeah, ratty red sweatshirt. Glasses? Like, yeah, glasses. Yeah, ball. That was Mike. And she's like, it's like some random old dude that's walking around the gym that they don't have any idea. And that's the way I want it, because now you could go into this same idea too. The goal of the coach is to eliminate the coach. If I get to the point where people don't know that I exist, but our business exists as a brand, as a place where people will go for really good training, then that to me is the height of success. And that's where we are right now in terms of no one expects me to train them. Like I won't, no matter how much money you have, you could come and be like, I want Mike to train me and I'll pay, $5,000 an hour. I'd be like, not happening. I'm not taking any clients. I don't care how much, I don't care what the money situation is. I don't want any commitments where I have to meet somebody X number of hours a week. I'm good.
See, like that, what you're saying, I think that, the word is leverage. Cause I struggle with that too. And I'm a little bit of a obsessive workaholic cause I love this stuff, but it's the analogy of like this spinning this heavy, like Ferris wheel, right? Like starting a business or coaching at the beginning, you're trying to move the wheel and it doesn't move for years, then eventually you move it a little bit and you get some motivation. But after a while, if you put in the work, it doesn't take as much energy to spin that wheel, right? You just got to kind of give it a little bit of a,
what my one is? Mine is the guy spinning the plates. Like I feel like I feel like I'm the guy spinning 4 or 5 plates, and there's always a plate that's wobbling, and I always got to run over it and give it a couple whacks. But you're right. I mean, but that's what I mean. I can remember I said to somebody, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, should you have left BU and opened up Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning? I probably would have said no. I would have said, it would have been easier to stay put at BU and just, get a raise every whatever, every 12 months and, put my money away in my retirement plan and have a nice, easy life. Now, at the 25-year mark, when I've got a really mature business and really great people that are working there, and I don't really have to work if I don't want to, now I look at this and think, oh my God, smartest thing I ever did. Yep. It's exactly like your Ferris wheel analogy in terms of there are times when you think, wow, this is really, really hard. This is just, and it's not going anywhere fast. And then suddenly you think, again, like investing, okay, I have an asset that I could, if I choose to, I can sell to somebody. Somebody will pay for this asset because it has a cash flow and a reputation. It's a thing. It's an entity that's capable of being sold.
Yeah. And again, it's like the more work you do, the more opportunities you have to have leverage and spinning stuff. And, I just think people try to spin too much stuff too early. and then everything stops spinning, right?
That's a part of where we are now, kind of in the, in the Instagram generation, right? Like, you're right. Like, people, I did a talk years ago for Pat Beef, on success secrets. And that's one of the things that I said. It was like, until you've coached 10,000 hours, don't make a DVD, don't write a book, don't write an ebook, don't have a website, like, don't do any of that stuff. Just coach, get your 10,000 hours in, and get really good at coaching. And then at some point you might have, like you're saying, you're writing a book now because you've got knowledge and wisdom that's worth something to somebody because you spent the time accumulating it. But if you'd said you were 25 and you're like, yeah, I'm going to write a book on, how to be successful in the fitness industry, I'd be like, I don't know how many people are going to want to read that book from a 25-year-old guy, because I don't know how successful you've really been. If you're 25 and you're not like poor, okay, maybe then that's success, but it's all relative.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I'm actually, what at this point in time, like, what stuff do you get excited about learning? I mean, what I mean? If right now, is there something that you're diving into that you're like, oh, this really excites me, and I'm diving into the resources?
Peter Tia stuff, zone 2 cardio. I am as anti-aerobic person as there is in the world, from my time in the team sport world. But the stuff that I'm starting to understand about this whole zone 2 cardio thing makes me curious, makes me think, hey, am I missing the boat? Is there something that I should be doing, that my clients should be doing, that's going to be beneficial? And I mean, I'm almost relearning physiology as I'm looking at mitochondria and heart physiology and all these things that really, I just probably weren't that important to me before. So I think the good thing about our field is that it's not the least bit static. Yeah. Particularly not for the smart people. I think it's really static for the dumb people. But for the smart people, it's not. And so there's going to constantly be another horizon, or, the things are going to ebb and flow, and you're going to realize, okay, something that 10 years ago I thought doesn't really make a difference, now suddenly seems to matter, and I need to go back and examine that. I need to maybe look at it from a different perspective. So but even for me, and then speed development stuff, I tweeted last night about, Tony Holler, and it's probably been 5 years ago now. I'd have to go back and look for videos and figure out when we actually started doing it. But we started actually timing all the time. I mean, we time every day our athletes come in the gym, we time them. And that's been a huge game changer. So I think, and it's really funny because Tony, have you ever met Tony?
I haven't met him, but I don't know who Tony is. Yeah.
Tony looks just like me. You'll laugh. Like when you see him, go look at his picture. He looks just like me. He's a 62-year-old bald guy with glasses, and, but I get another one of these 62-year-old bald guys with glasses who I'm looking at and thinking, wow, this guy's making me re-examine the way that I think about things. And he was a chemistry teacher till last year. He just retired. I mean, he was a public school chemistry teacher who coached track and football. And much like me, his dad was a coach. They had very similar backgrounds, but he just was one of these guys that really got me thinking and examining and saying, I think this is something that we're missing. And I love that. That's why I always go back to, whether it was meeting Gray Cook the first time, or McGill, or Mark Verstegen, or so many of these people that I've come across in the course of my career, and thought, wow, this person has a unique perspective. This person is onto something that maybe everybody else isn't onto. And then I latched onto those people, and it's almost like they drag you to the top, because they're going, they're at the top of their field, or they're getting near the top of their field, and all you're doing is chasing them. And the result of chasing them is that you get sort of infinitely better, particularly if you can find 4 or 5 really good people to chase. And I think I always say lucky, and it's probably not really luck, but I've always had a really good filter. And I've always been able to figure out, like, I could listen to a lecture and be like, that guy's full of shit. And then I could listen to another lecture and be like, that guy knows what he's talking about. And I remember like listening to Gray Cook talk and thinking, man, this dude is smart. Like, he's thinking, it's next level thinking, right? And then listening to McGill, and the same thing, like, wow, he's really smart. This is next level thinking. And being able to think, and meeting Mark and being like, wow, this guy, now you say with like Kim, he's 10 years younger than me. I'd be like, this kid is sharp. He was 30, I was 40. And I was like, this kid's sharp. He gets it. He's on to something here. And just realizing that I'm going to befriend these people. I'm going to stay in contact with these people. I'm going to, whatever it is, buy their materials, go to their courses, because they're helping me get better. It's a very selfish, self-serving process in terms of getting yourself better. It's literally like looking at someone and thinking, hey, you're really good. Can I steal your shit? It's like,
I mean,
but it's like, yes, I'd love for you to. That's why I do these seminars. I'm doing these so that the few people like you who are actually smart enough to embrace this, you can take it. It'd be like someone having a house full of money saying, yeah, just go in, grab as much as you need. I got tons. I got plenty. Stuff as much in your pocket as you can and go.
What
That's
a great
that's
analogy.
knowledge, right? But that's knowledge.
Yeah.
That's these guys, that they're saying to you like, oh, I've got all of this and I can share it with you and you can have as much of it as you want. And you can then take it back and share it with your people.
That's such a great analogy.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
so dumb.
I think about that because, again, you said fortunate. I would say fortunate too, but I made the choice to go. I was still playing pro basketball actually when I went to a seminar in Birmingham, England. So I flew from Slovenia to Birmingham, England for a Nick Grantham, Eric Cressy seminar because I was reading all the T Nation Elite FTS stuff, and I'm there, I'm just geeking out. I'm an athlete, but I'm geeking out on all stuff. Met Eric, bought all his products. A year later or less than a year later, I went to his place when it just opened up. Once I opened a gym, I went to Mastermind. There's Mike Robertson. Joel lives in my area, so I've known Joel Jameson for 15 years. You talked about Zone 2. So, he's been one of my best friends for a decade. And, that guy was, 16 years ago, wrote MMA conditioning, was like Zone 2 aerobic capacity, so important, drilled it into my head. And it's been all these people that, I went to Perform Better seminars starting 16 years ago. And I'm like, wow, these guys are smart, right? Buy everything, consume everything, go to the masterminds, go to the internship, obsessively, honestly, that was where I spent my money, majority of my money. But if there is a cheat code, it's like, watch that, apply as much as you possibly can so that you can get some feedback and reflect on it and then course correct. It sounds simple. It's a lot of hard work, but you just said it. Like, when you see somebody smart, like, fucking follow them and learn and just apply as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah. And it's like, I would say steal smart people's shit. Like, that's the key. Because they're out there, like, whether it's Chris Poirier or Perform Better, he's going to pay a whole bunch of smart people to come and talk. And you get to take as much of it home with you as you can possibly consume. And then go back and use it. And no licenses, no fees, one price of admission. Like, it's crazy. But I'm like you, like, I would go, when we started out, it was just, there was nothing but the NSCA convention. But even going there and sitting and listening and, being in the front row and going and talking to the speakers and befriending people. Like, I look at it now and think, I can call Al Vermeil on the phone. I can call Johnny Parker on the phone. There's these guys. And the only reason I can is because I made the effort to meet them. I made an effort to because like, right? It can seem really contrived when someone comes up to you after the lecture and says, Luca, that was unbelievable. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. I really learned a lot out of that. But even if the person was totally full of shit and was only saying it to try to get you to like them, you would still be affected by that. You would still be like,
100%. Yes.
Be like, that guy really liked my lecture. What's his name? Because you can't help but be victim to attention or to flattery, right? You just can't. And it's so easy. I can remember, I was probably maybe in my 20s, maybe early 30s, but I would read articles and I would not understand something and I would just call information. I got Mike Stone on the phone one time at Auburn University. I just called and I said, I need the number for the National Strength Research Center at Auburn University. And damn, the guy gave it to me, yellow page, whatever information. I called up and like, is Dr. Stone there? And someone was like, yeah, I'll get him. And next thing I know, he's on the phone. I'm like, I'm reading this article and I don't understand this. And he's explaining it to me. and I did the same thing with Don Chu. I called Don Chu in California. I remember I read an article and it said Adler Sports Injury Clinic, Castro Valley, California. I still remember exactly the address and everything. I just called information. I said, I want a number for Adler Sports Injury Clinic in Castro Valley, California. 2 minutes later, I'm on the phone and I'm like, is Don Chu available? And they're like, can you ask who's calling? I'm like, yeah, tell him it's Michael Boyle. Like, he's on the phone. Right.
It's like, there's a Michael Boyle here for you. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
like, but sometimes if you ask, like I've talked to people who work, like, don't let that call through. Like if someone calls looking for me, I am not here. I need to make sure I actually want to talk to this person. But because I know how easy it is to just act like you're part of the information. And the same thing I asked Don Chu. I still remember we talked about, he called him high hand clean or something. Yeah, high hand. I'm like, what's a high hand clean? And he was like, it's like a pocket clean. It's like from right below. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But I wanted to know. It was in the article. I wanted to know. I called him. So I guess my point is that and now it's so much easier. Like I can DM you, like you literally DM me on Instagram. And a minute later, I was like, what time do you want to get back on?
Yep.
Right. Communication has improved so much that you can probably get to anybody that you want to with a reasonable amount of persistence.
Yeah. And you don't, I mean, think about those years too. Like most of the time you'd have to go travel for just about anything. Now you can buy courses, like live streaming, Zoom certifications, message people on DM like that were hard to reach before. I mean, definitely a lot harder. So, I mean, there's other than having like an intent and a focus, if you want to get better, it is right there for you.
Yeah. We had Patrick McEwen on the other day at our staff meeting. He did an hour talk at our staff meeting for us because, Peter Lakatos, I don't know if you know Peter, but Peter's yeah. So Peter was like, you guys should really meet, Patrick is great, blah, blah, blah. Emails go back and forth. And I said, hey, would you talk to our staff, for an hour in the staff meeting? And he's like, absolutely, I'd love to. Done. Okay. You think, wow, how did we, we got that guy to do it. I even go back, like, it's funny. I go back and forth on Twitter with David Epstein, which makes me laugh because, I love the guy's books. I think he's an unbelievable writer, but he responds to my tweets now. I'm just like, really? David Epstein responds to my tweets. That's pretty cool. But we have so much capacity to reach people. And that's why whenever people talk, I don't like Twitter, I don't like social media. I'm like, you're a freaking idiot. You have no idea. This is like, this is the freaking TV and the transistor radio and the personal computer and everything like all rolled into one. Like you have the opportunities that we didn't even think about. I had to wait for Muscle and Fitness and Ironman to come out. I would go to the newsstand and be like, are they here yet? The guy would get tired, like, they're not here yet. Because that was how I got my information. I had to wait for the next month's Muscle magazine to come out. And I had to figure out what day it was going to come out on so I could read the articles that I wanted to read.
You know what? That's the last thing I did want to ask you to your thoughts on. Because obviously, like you just shared the social, you can learn a lot especially if you're following the right people. But when it comes to coaches, creating and that kind of first phase of, let's say your first 3-4 years, you're in industry. I have some thoughts around this. I'd love to hear your thoughts about, it doesn't matter the platform, if it's Instagram or Twitter or YouTube, and you're in the industry, you're learning, you're busting your butt. What are your thoughts about social media? And two, like, obviously going to your team, because if they're like, hey, like, can we post? Should we post? Are you encouraged to do it?
We encourage our people to post. I'm like, post, make sure that it's good. Make sure that the people in the background are good. Do you know what I mean? Like, make sure that the content is good. We talk about it all the time in terms of, I always say, would you Instagram it? Would you YouTube it? That's what I want to think. That's what I want you to think about when you're going to put something up on your personal account that might eventually find its way to our business account. You don't want to put something up there that's going to embarrass you or embarrass the person in it, or embarrass potentially somebody in the background, whatever it is. But you should be posting. I actually wrote a Twitter post about that. And I said something to the effect of comment, but don't confront. So effectively, like, again, if I want to get to know Luca, then I'm going to follow Luca on Twitter. And when he posts something, I'm going to post a positive response to that. I'm not going to disagree with you at 24 years old. And that's where people do it all wrong because, and I could name 4 or 5 young guys on Twitter that I've blocked for years because they're assholes and they're not 30 years old and they think they know it all. And one of them, I took the time to call on the phone. I actually got his phone number, called him and said, hey, you're really hurting yourself with your social media persona. And he argued with me. And I was like, hopefully someday I see him 10 years from now. And he's like, yeah, you were right. I should have toned it down. I shouldn't have been such a know-it-all. But I think that's the difference is, again, realize that you can use social media as again, you filter, like you said, you follow the right people, you screen out, you block, you mute, you do all the things that you need to do to curate your feed. And sometimes all you do, maybe you just go on and say, who does Mike Boyle follow? Who does Luca follow? That's probably a pretty good place to start, right? You start looking at that because it'll say at the bottom of yours, following and, this
Yeah,
or
yeah.
so you can, again, cheat, right? Cheat. I was think cheating is the way to go. We discourage everyone from cheating in school. And then when we get out, it's like, it's all about cheating. And then we, like I said, it's the Anthony Robbins thing. Success leaves clues. That's cheating. Find successful people, copy what they do. It's that simple. And we don't do it. And instead, we might initiate arguments to look smart on social media. Or we might post dumb shit ourselves on social media. Or we might, like I would, people post politics. Okay, you want to get, you want to turn people off. Great. Tell them your political views. 50% of the people in America are going to hate you. No matter who you are. I don't care what you post. 50% of the people in America will hate you. Because if you have a viewpoint, 50% of the people have the other viewpoint. And so stay out of it. Stay out of all of those things and be a bit of a lurker. Be in the background. And then start to introduce yourself to people, maybe send a DM and say, hey, really liked that article. What do you think about that? See if you get a response. Because you will, it's, Alan Cosgrove would always talk about kind of top of mind experience, right? There are people that like I call my social media boyfriends, but there are people that I know that I only know from social media. I don't know them at all. I don't even know. I've said, I don't know, I don't know if you're 5'2" or 6'8", right? I know you played basketball, but I'm not exactly sure how big you are because I only see you in, in little boxes like this or in little pictures. And so we don't even really know these people yet. We can have relationships. That was never possible before.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly powerful. That's why people say, well, you're really big on social media. I'm like, yes, because I'm not a dunce. I'm smart enough, hey, it's raining. Okay, I'll either get an umbrella or I'll go inside. That, that someone would look at that, oh, wow, that Mike Boyle, he's super smart. You realize when it rained, he should go inside or get an umbrella. No, there's so much of this stuff is common sense. All you got to do is utilize your common sense. Hey, I'd like to be friends with Luca. I think what I'll do is go on social media and argue with him and insult him. It's like, yeah, that's a surefire.
That's really going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna have super positive memory of you. When he looks at you, he's probably gonna block you, and now you're out of his consciousness. You're gone. Or I could go on and be like, "Hey, Luca, great post. Really enjoyed that. Learned a lot." And then you look at my thing and you go, "Oh, Mike Boyle. Mike Boyle always comments on my posts because I do that. I follow people now. I follow people back if they make a favorable comment or they retweet or whatever it is. I follow them back because I think, okay, this is somebody that I probably want to create or make part of my circle.
It's a human thing to do because I always look at it like behave like you would in real life, because that person that's saying some shit on your stuff, in real life they probably wouldn't communicate with you like that. And I'm like, if you try to make social media more like real human interaction, you'll probably be a lot better off. Now, unless if you're a dick in real life, well then it's just that's your problem.
Social media like you're in a bar. Like would I say this to that guy in a bar when he was going to punch me in the face? And if I wouldn't, probably shouldn't say it then. You probably should keep it to yourself. Or, would I want my mother to read this? There's a lot of ways. There's so many like kind of filters you can run it through, but they all kind of come back to the same place in terms of how am I going to feel if I happen to meet this person in real life and have to account for myself, whether it be that person looking and thinking, I'm going to slap you. You know what I mean? Or I'm just going to snub you. I'm not going to not like you because of your social media persona. And I don't think enough people think, it's because it's typical. Like, I mean, internet tough guy is, it's a caricature almost in and of itself. So, but those are people who are misusing literally the greatest development of our lifetime. Because people, like, I do podcasts. One guy said to me, well, tell me about the greatest technological breakthrough. And I'm like, oh, without a doubt, the personal computer. And the guy was like, what? And I was like, I was coaching before they were computers. Like, we didn't have personal computers. We had yellow notepads and we wrote stuff on them, and we had typewriters and we typed out workouts. It's like, this is how you did it. And people forget that. I mean, I'm of a generation who knows when there were no cell phones, there were no computers. I mean, but the cool thing is the weight room is about the same, right? I mean, you look at the weight room and you think, some bars and some racks and some dumbbells and a pull down machine. That was pretty much the same as when I was in high school.
I mean, that's, I'll finish on this note, that because I made a post about it a little while ago about the window test, and I legitimately heard that from you. I mean, it had to have been like 14, 15 years ago when I heard it, wrote it down, and I was just like, all right, I want to make sure that anybody watching through the window, my people better be on point. But then I, it was kind of like, okay, well, what's the window test on social? And you mentioned it, right? What are you posting? But it being almost a, representation of all, I think you do well if you do great work, face-to-face coaching, and then you share lessons, even if you're on the come up. I feel like social media can help you become better because you're teaching, right? If you go from a perspective of like, I'm going to teach something, well, then you gotta know it better. So, creating content can help you become better because you're teaching, right? And teaching is the best form of learning. But to me, that's been one big window test. And I keep thinking about that. I was like, okay, the stuff that we do in here, the stuff I do in business, let me just share it in, infotaining ways. But then if somebody ever does the window test on my coaching, my life, our business, our team, I want it to be like, oh yeah, that's the same shit. And it's kind of like how you represent yourself,
That's how I say that over and over again. We said it the other day at the staff meeting. And that's, the mirror in the window, it's the mirror you see yourself in. It's the window that everybody sees you through. And it's really simple. You just got to remember that part. And sometimes we post, I tell people, I don't mind you posting real kids doing real stuff. And I tell people all the time, I don't post perfect stuff. If I wanted to post perfect stuff, that's all I do.
Yeah.
But I post our athletes doing things. And a lot of times when they're doing things, they're doing hard things. And hard things are not going to be perfect or pretty. They're going to probably be a little bit flawed. And I'm 100% good with that, because if you came into our gym, you'd see people doing hard things and you'd realize that it wasn't perfect. You'd see people, wiggling around on the last chin up or kicking their legs or whatever. And I'm like, and I look at that, people go, oh, they kicked their legs. And I'm like, yeah. And I applauded the effort, because you know what I really wanted? I wanted them to get the 8th one. And I didn't really care that the 8th one wasn't perfect. I cared that they hung on and kept pulling to get the 8th one. So, and that's, I guess, part of it too. There's room in this process for less than perfect.
Yeah. I mean,
we have some people who are shocked. Some guys come in our place and like, oh my God, I thought everybody would be perfect at everything. And I'm like, this isn't like Disney, this is real gym. People are working out, not going to be perfect.
Man, Mike, I could talk to you for days, man. Seriously, like
we just talked for an hour and 40 minutes,
And that like you said at the beginning, right? It's gonna fly. Which just means that somewhere down the line, we definitely gotta talk more, because every conversation, adds more questions in my head, but this is why I love it. And man, I appreciate you for not just for this conversation. I appreciate you for everything that you've done in the industry, and kind of been a shining light on how to do things, even for the people that have the Mike Boyle Pussy Club. I'm gonna start the anti-club for that right there. But man, it's an honor. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to lead people to, as far as where can they find anybody that's not like follow Mike? I think would probably be under a rock. But if there are folks that listen to this and are like, I don't know who Mike Boyle is, he's the old guy with the glasses and the sweater.
The glasses, sitting in his house. I don't know where he is, but he's talking to some old guy. But no, so Twitter is mboyle1959. Instagram is Michael_Boyle1959. And Our certification is certified functional strength coach, which I think is really good. If
One of the
somebody-
best. I confirm this. One of the best certifications there is, period.
We're having huge success, in all honesty, with that all over the world now. I mean, we've got it in probably, I don't even know, more than 20 countries. And it's going really well. So if people are interested in that, that's certifiedfsc.com. Those are the big things. I mean, our Body by Boyle's our gym website, but that's like if you want to sign up. So if somebody's listening to your podcast happens to live within 10 minutes of Woburn, Massachusetts, they can look at that one. But otherwise, and then strengthcoach.com. We're still banging away on that. We still are there doing the same thing, posting information, educating coaches. I'm on there every day. I enjoy that. I like the education part of this. I do like teaching people and I like helping people. So it's a very easy fit for me. I don't have to like something like this podcast. As you said, I could talk to you. This could be like a Huberman job where we're on here for 3 hours, just
and I mean, look, that's the thing is like when you get to the point where you're like, this is what I love doing and I love sharing it, it definitely becomes easier. And, I mean, that's where I'm like, hey, find platforms where you can kind of share that. And we'll put all the stuff in the show notes so that people can click through to it. And for everybody that's listening, look, if you got value from it, please share it, share it directly with somebody that's maybe in the coaching industry that needs to hear some of this stuff. Share it obviously on a wider platform if you can. That's to me for this, that's the only thing I ask for. We don't really have sponsors. This is just straight content, straight fire. And make sure you follow Mike. And if you disagree with him in a non-dumb way.
Thank you, my friend. It was a pleasure.
Appreciate you, Mike.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, my friend.
All right. I'll see you.
Bye.